Welcome back, y'all, to the Conscious Connection. We'll keep the lines of communication open. My name is Marquise C. Copper.
I am Javon Moore.
And let's get into it. Today's topic is really evolving around something I think very personal, is trauma. And specifically, is all trauma bad trauma? What do you think?
Now, immediately, my trauma is I'm finna eat during this whole podcast. I have no regard to that.
So apparently this podcast is going to be a mukbang instead of a normal episode because he is
hungry,
eating.
Bro.
We hungry.
I'm hungry.
I don't blame him. When you haven't eaten for a long day.
Facts.
I get it. I mean, some of us ain't strong enough to do 18, 20 hours like myself.
No, I'm not. I'm weakling.
But that's interesting question, though. Mm-hmm. Is all trauma good trauma?
All right. Just because I'm about to eat, I'm finna start this off. Anywho, honestly, I think that there's certain trauma that defines who you are, right? Because if you think about it, I feel like we have certain trauma that build so much character in it. Like people, like the most funnest people have the worst trauma. I know that sounds bad, but like the funnest people have the worst trauma. It brings a certain type of closeness to you, a certain type of kindness that you have, a certain type of people that you have when it comes to trauma. Because you understand people so much. You understand the bad in them, you understand the good in them, and you understand what type of person you don't want to be. And I think that's the important thing. When you understand what type of person you don't want to be, you start focusing on the person you want to be. And when you focus on the person you want to be, you attract more people, you're more lively, and that only comes from trauma.
What? Bro, what are you talking about?
That level of understanding who you don't want to be only comes from trauma.
I mean, but bad experiences don't have to be traumatic. So if you deal with somebody, right, that gives you a sense of feeling empty, that's one thing, right? But when you deal with somebody that, like, all right, they're doing things that you just in general do not like whatsoever, that's different. If you don't like somebody and you see how they're moving and they move in a way that you just don't like it, I would say that that's a hard one. It really is a hard one, but I wouldn't say that's trauma that they're giving is good trauma. I would say that, me personally, I don't think any trauma is really good. I think that there are things that we go through and we, despite those things, do well.
So let me ask you a question then, right? The type of person you are, because you're an empath, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, an empath is basically somebody who feels other people's emotions to a very severe extent, right? So
it is not a superpower, regardless of what this man says.
It's an extreme superpower.
It's not superpower.
Right. So
that's like Clark Kent using X-ray vision. He can only see old people. That is not superpower.
It is. But, right, with you being an empath, right, you care for people deeply because you can understand, you can feel these feelings, right? But being an empath, I'm sorry, it only comes from having trauma. Because
I've always been like that, though. I've always been able to feel things for people.
Do you think you'll be that level of empath without your trauma?
Well, life is what has developed it to the point where I'm like that. Life has gotten to this point.
What do you mean by that?
Dealing with all different types of people, dealing with my own struggles, my own thinking, all of those things combined is what allowed me to get to where I am now. Now, the trauma aspect of it, yes, some of that trauma had been feeling it in such an intense way, and the way that I've had to deal with it, it did play a part into how deep my empathy goes. But I've always had a strong sense and measure of empathy where I could put myself in anyone's shoes. And I try not to voice that so much because some people are like, oh, you could never know what I'm feeling like. I'll be looking at people like, try me. And Granted, yes, I can't know exactly what you're going through because I'm not you. You have to walk a mile in your own shoes. I can only walk a couple inches in it.
Yeah.
But even just walking a couple inches in your, and mind you, I said inches instead of feet, because people think, oh, I can walk a foot. Some people can put themselves in someone else's boot and can't even lift that thing off the ground.
Message.
You know, you got to understand that. So I say walking a couple inches in someone else's shoes for a reason. All right. I say that for a reason. Whether it's an inch or a mile, a race is a race. Dominic Toretto.
That's true. But you know what the difference is? It's kind of like, have you ever? This is not a shot at anybody. This is not a shot at anybody. I promise.
Papa.
But have you ever met somebody who has been homeschooled?
Yes.
Now, compare them socially to someone who's been through high school, middle school, primary school, all that, right? Do they have the same social cues or the social skills?
No.
In your opinion, whose social skills is better?
The people who are around other kids.
So my thing is, with those two differences, understand, in this day and age, going to school is traumatic. Going to school is traumatic, right? Those who are homeschooled miss out on that trauma. Now, this is just an example, but those who are homeschooled miss out on that trauma. And now when you put them in the world, right? You put them against, okay, cool, go interact with people, go make connections, go network, whatever. They don't have those skills. They don't have that type of trauma to not just read a room, not just to understand the situation, not just to have that certain level of street smarts or whatever. They don't have none of that, and they're not succeeding. They're not on the same level as someone who's been in high school, been bullied, been beaten up, now seeing, okay, you know what? This guy doesn't really like me. How do you know? Because I've been in this situation before. I've seen how this situation plays out, and this situation isn't going to play out well. Versus someone who is trauma free, go into a world like that, they're going to get eaten up in a world in a snap. So at the end of the day, that trauma saves that kid so much grief, so much stuff he doesn't have to go through because he has trauma. So when we talk about good trauma and bad trauma, I feel like there's a certain level of trauma that certain kids just need to have to survive. It's kind of like survival instinct.
That's like saying there's such thing as good and bad bullying. It's on the same lines. And I know people who say technically there is good bullying. And I'll tell you right now, no bullying is good. And you keep saying trauma. Every time you said trauma in your explanation, I kept thinking to myself, change that word from trauma to experience. Because there are plenty of people who know what it means to be picked on. But the amount of people who've been picked on versus the amount of people who have been bullied or jumped, like beat up, is significantly different. I can have that experience of seeing someone that happened to somebody and no, I don't want that, right? Versus somebody who may have the trauma of getting beat up.
Yeah, but also you have to understand, seeing that is traumatic as well.
It is traumatic.
So
but
that's the type of trauma.
The experience, though, the trauma is not really the part that you're focusing on. It's really the experience. You're getting this experience of being around these things. It can be traumatic. Those experiences can be traumatic, but they don't always have to be traumatic. So like being around a bunch of kids, right? Everybody throwing jokes, right? You get that. But throwing jokes can be fun. It can be normal, right? It doesn't have to be traumatic. But when, people are ganging up on one kid and you talking bad about his mama and saying all these things, like, man, that's why you got left back 3 times. And, you and your brothers got all 3 different daddies. Like, saying some stuff like that, yeah, that can result into trauma, but that's experience that goes into trauma. Life is an experience. You're going to have experiences in your life. So trauma are small pieces in your life that have caused you a measure of pain that you hold on to. But not all your experiences in life you hold on to, but those little pieces of trauma do.
Again, I feel like it's a very tricky line to talk about because it's like, bring it back to what you said before when you were just like the difference between experience and
trauma.
My thing is kind of in a way that experience is a type of trauma. If we break it down to the simplest form.
Or you can experience trauma.
Okay. Okay, we can say that. But in the sense of when kids go to school, right? They get there. They have these little crushes. They have girlfriends. They have all this stuff, and then they get their heart broken. That's traumatic, and that's also an experience. One thing is getting your heart broken. Very traumatic experience. Now you know how to talk to a girl. Now you know, okay, you know this worked out because of this. That's not happening again. In the future, you know how to move, right? You have friends, right? You talk behind somebody's back. They get upset. Now that friend is now an enemy. That's traumatic. That's also experience. So in the sense of that, trauma is building you up as you go. You can say it's experience, but it's trauma. You have to call a spade a spade. It was a traumatic experience.
It's not a spade if it's a joker.
I don't know.
At the end of the day, my joker trumps your spade. At the end of the day, my joker trumps your spade. If you're playing bid whist, it definitely trumps your spade. And the big joker too, not the little joker.
But at the end of the day, it's just like, it's just a traumatic experience, but it's still trauma.
The thing about it is, right? Majority of the things you go through in life is not traumatic. Majority of things that you go through in life are not traumatic whatsoever. They're not traumatic. Majority of things you go through. Some people even create their own trauma.
What?
Some people create their own trauma.
Some people create their own
Create their own
I
trauma.
need explanation, bro.
Right? You know how they say some people make stories up in their head and they tell the story so many times they start to believe their own story, aka they believe
That's
lies.
called delusion.
Yeah, but delusions can turn into a false sense of reality.
What do you mean?
So, right, if I tell it, like a kid says, I'm going to be tall like my dad. I'm going to be tall like my dad, right? He keeps believing it. As he starts growing older, I'm going to be tall just like my dad. I'm going to be tall like my dad, right? He gets to that age where he really should hit his growth spurt. He hit nothing. I'm going to be tall like my dad.
Okay.
Well, he gets to that point where the same age as his dad. I'm going to be tall like my dad. I'm just as tall as my dad. Your dad's a foot taller than you. But he believes he's as tall as his dad.
Again, that's delusional, and that delusion can be broken down so easily.
But it is delusional. But why is he stuck on that delusion?
What do you mean? Why he's stuck? Because he
He's-
fed himself that reality. I get that.
He fed himself that reality, but there's a reason. There's a piece of reality that's a part of that. The piece is his father's tall, and everybody compared him to his father. And because everybody compared him to his father, he created that false sense of reality so strong that he believed it himself. And he created his own trauma by allowing all of that to mold him. Now, some would say some people don't have an option of allowing certain things to affect you, which is okay. In some cases, yes. Some cases, no.
But I don't think that's trauma.
No, it is trauma, because you know how many kids that want to live up to their father's image and they can't, or worse, some want to live down their father's image. Drake, you know, there are people who have a measure of trauma that they may have created in their own self. Even people, right, who get their heart broken. Woman told you no, and you keep simping, and you keep all these extra stuff. You creating your own trauma, and when your heart gets broken, you have no one to blame. When she told you no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 5
times. She done said this all these many times. There is no reason for you to keep moving on. You have created. Like, some people fall in love with the idea of somebody instead of actually falling in love with somebody.
See, I feel like you're teetering on. Is that the right word? Teetering on a very thin line of delusional and trauma, because what you're explaining sounds like delusions.
There's people who think they have trauma,
But
and they
delusions are
have
trauma.
delusions of grandeur.
Delusions of grandeur, I don't think, is the same as trauma. Trauma.
There isn't, but there are people who you think they have trauma. They go to therapy and they find out it's delusion.
So those are two separate things. And with delusion, I feel like it's a breakdown of character.
It is a breakdown of character.
It's I feel like it's the exact opposite of trauma.
But thing about it is, trauma breaks down your character too.
But trauma breaks it down to build it up. Like we about to get real nerdy right here. Trauma is
Lord.
the Super Saiyan of emotion, in the sense of you get beat up so badly, but once you heal, you're stronger than that last version of you that got beat up.
Who says people heal from it?
Huh?
Who says people heal from it?
No. Well, trauma is.
Who says people heal from it?
calloused. It's callous. As in, like, you may not heal from it, but you're still going to be stronger than the last time you experienced that trauma.
Most people aren't.
Name an example.
I named the 41.3 million people who are suffering from depression and anxiety, who are sitting in mental health offices, taking medications.
So check this out, right?
They're stuck.
No, right? They're stuck. But I guarantee you, the way they're dealing with depression now is 10 times better than when it first happened.
Mean being stuck on medication where pill pushers want you to keep taking it because they make money.
A group of pill pushers?
But compared to when it first happened, when they couldn't even understand what was going on,
They still don't understand what's going on.
No, but they don't have a full understanding of what's going on, but they understand it a lot better than when it first started appearing. Because think about it, right? When you first started suffering from depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in denial. You don't know exactly what's going on. You don't have an understanding of why you're sad or these random feelings, right? And it pushes you down even more, right? But as you grow, you're starting to understand yourself. You start to understand, oh, I suffer from depression. And because I suffer from depression, I have to move accordingly to this. Now you're coping with it better. You're understanding how to move. You're guiding yourself better from that trauma. So literally, you've grown from when you was first dealing with it.
You're teetering on the right and wrong answer. You're right and wrong answer.
How so?
I've always known. I've always known I had depression. I've always known.
But have you dealt with it the same way? And
No, I dealt, again, like we talked about this before, you're growing up in a time period. I didn't even say time period. You're growing up with, parents who are minorities. Depression is not a real thing to most minority parents. Mm-hmm. Period. It's considered a rich person's disease or a white person's disease. That's what it's considered. So I already knew that I could not come forward and say something, even though when I went to a doctor's office, they asked me questions, they tested me, and they was like, yo, you definitely have depression. Do you want to talk to your mom about that? They gave me the option. I said no. I said no. And they said, why? Because my mama is black.
Did you not see her when you
Did you not want me to have good night's sleep tonight? Do you want me to go home and be interrogated and get 10,000 questions asked?
How you got
towards me?
depression? You don't pay bills in this house.
That's exactly, and mind you, ain't cracking my mama, man. That's my mama. I love my mama, all right?
Oh,
But
no.
you got to understand.
This joke's not for his mama. It's for all black
Yeah,
mamas.
it's for all black mamas, really. But you got to understand, too, with the generation they came from hard work, ingenuity, and there was no back talk and there was no laziness. You worked or you was in school. If you wasn't in school, you worked. And if there was some people that had to drop out of school to work so they could so they could provide for their families. My mom didn't have to do that because my grandmother did well by them, and my dad didn't have to do that because my grandparents did good by him. So you have to take into account all of these things and really understand that even with things like depression, right? And as someone who has a form of chronic depression, who's had it since I was 8 years old, you really don't understand yourself until you understand how to get out of your own way. And most people don't know how to do that. Majority of people don't know how to get out of their own way. Because
what do you mean by get out of your own way?
To a point, there were times when I wallowed in my sadness. I knew exactly what it was. I knew exactly what was causing it.
But you just didn't care.
No, I wallowed in it. I created my own trauma at points. I would sit inside of my own despair and not try to get myself out. I would sit in it. I would soak in it so deep that there's a portion of me that said, bro, at 8 years old, I don't want to live no more. I sat in it so deep. It wasn't just depression telling me, because people think that, oh, depression's telling you to. That's not how that works. That's not how that works. Your brain goes into this spiraling effect where you start questioning everything. This is the craziest moment I've ever had, where I thought to myself, what if my body was off the ground? Now, what if my body was outside of the earth? So I could see the earth, right? All right, what if I zoomed out even further out of the galaxy? Out of the solar system. What if I zoomed out even further out of the galaxy? What if I zoom in out of further, even out of that and out of that and out of that? And my brain would zoom until I saw nothing but black space. No stars, just black space. I zoomed out that far. That was me creating my own traumas. I was creating this feeling of nothingness. And I didn't understand that I was doing that until I got a little older. I didn't understand why I was doing that. But I knew the feeling already. The trauma I caused was making me feel that way.
And what happened because
I couldn't control that narrative because I was stuck in a box. I didn't have no one that listens to me. I was by myself. It was a time period when depression was not notable at all. No one cared. When you're stuck in that box, you're stuck in your own brain, your own mind, and you're still a kid. You still have all these different kid things that you got to do. You still got to go to school, got to do this homework. This is when they started giving out the stupid packets in school. I hated that. Oh. And now they got these kids going to school with textbook size packets. Why don't you just throw the book at them and call it a day?
They don't have packets anymore?
They don't got packets no more?
They do iPads or PDF form.
That's even worse to me, because now you can load it up on me and there's no shortage of paper. But to go back on it, yes, some of the experiences in my life have been traumatic. There have been quite a few things that have been traumatic. There are things that I've caused my own trauma with, and I understand that, and I forgive myself for doing that. But I forgive young me for doing that. Older me, after going through therapy, after being on medication, taking myself off because I realized my was a pill pusher. My therapist was awesome, by the way, but my psychiatrist was a pill pusher. I understood that. Noticing how I felt on the medication, how I felt off of it, and understanding that this was a choice I had to make on my own, and I had to choose not to put myself in traumatic events. So yes, now getting older and understanding all of these things, and it wasn't from the experience, it was giving honor to my trauma and understanding what I went through, why I went through it, and how I don't want to go through it ever again. But the trauma is not what molded me. It was getting older and understanding where I was at that point. The trauma didn't do that. It's me getting wiser and understanding where I was then, forgiving myself, honoring that trauma, and moving forward.
But again, you getting older, but your trauma is forcing you to get, because it's more like, no, listen, it's kind of like
not wanting to be stuck forced me to do it.
So I'll tell you exactly the difference in it, right? It's the difference between a cold sitting, just sitting on the ground, and time passing. That coal is getting older, but it's not changing. There's no pressure. There's no nothing. It's just there, right? So the coal is getting older, right? Versus a coal that's pressurized over time and pressurized over time and becomes a diamond.
Did you know too much pressure actually breaks the rock and it becomes nothing?
Well,
not enough pressure and it literally just becomes disintegrated coal.
It's a give and take. But again, like I said, trauma does help growth. Versus people with no trauma.
I don't know anybody who doesn't have any trauma. Everybody's got trauma of some kind.
Oh, yes, you do.
Everybody has trauma of some kind.
I can promise you know somebody without trauma.
I don't know anybody without trauma. I know for a fact everybody in this world has trauma. You know why? Because we're all going through the same world and we're all imperfect.
I can promise you I can name you
somebody. I can promise you, show me somebody who don't got no trauma, I can point it out to them. I can listen to them for 5 minutes. I point out 5 traumatic things about them already.
Oh, you know what?
In 5 minutes.
This is better. Hit the mute button on your mic.
Why I gotta hit the mute button on my mic?
You see, did it no trauma. No trauma. You turn your mic back on.
Absolutely. All right, so to help you out there, right? Take a person who went to Catholic school their entire life, all girls Catholic school, and then she gets put into general population high school with boys, girls of all different kinds of races, nationalities, shapes, and colors.
Okay.
Same process.
But again,
Culture shock is not even the proper word to describe that. This is a social shock. This is also a mental shock. And no, I'm sorry, that person does have trauma too. Like you said before, you opened up with it. You said the happiest people or the funniest people to be around have the most trauma. Who knew Robin Williams suffered with so much?
oh, you don't even want to get into that.
Who knew
Oh,
Robin Williams? I loved Robin Williams growing up. And to find out he had mental health issues, I respected him so much more after that.
and he was a comedian at that.
Yes.
And he was a comedian. But I promise you, this man was screaming from the top of the buildings about his mental health, and no one just listened because he was funny. That's
It was- and it
another
was
thing. We're not going to
also
get into that now, but that's another
The
thing.
time periods that he was prevalent. You got to think about it. This man was on SNL. This man went through the entire 80s. This man made Hook.
Mrs.
And then
Doubtfire.
Mrs. Doubtfire, Patch Adams, Jumanji. He made so many. Popeye.
Captain Captain.
He made so many movies that were hits. Constant hit after hit after hit after hit. And he's expected to keep that up. I take people like Robert Downey Jr. His career died. You know what revived his career? Iron Man. Nobody wanted to hire him after a while.
Trauma.
Iron Man. But thing about it is, you show me somebody that says they have no trauma, and I'll show you 10,000 things about them that are traumatic. And people say, "Oh, this
Chris Evans.
huh?
Chris Evans.
Chris
That
Evans,
man
who?
don't got
Captain
no
America.
trauma. Captain
I
America.
mean, the one that missed out on Jessica Biel and left that to Justin Timberlake.
Language.
That one,
Say it again.
the one that messed up with Jessica Biel and ended up losing her to Justin Timberlake.
Who's Jessica Biel?
Oh my goodness, really?
She played in a movie.
Nope. No, we ain't gonna continue that. We gonna leave that alone. Like I said, you show me somebody who you say has no trauma, I could point out at least 5 things in 5 minutes. At least. I don't know anybody on this planet. I'm talking too much.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody on this planet that has no trauma. I can guarantee I can find somebody. I can guarantee I find at least 5
Then I
things.
feel
about it.
like your definition of trauma is too broad. Then.
I feel like there is no such thing as your definition of trauma. Either it's trauma or it's not. If you make up your own definition,
black
it's
and
not a
white.
definition. It's an opinion.
Okay, so then what's the definition of having trauma?
Oh, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Alexa,
No, don't talk to her.
what's the definition of trauma?
See how he asked this robot to give an answer, who's going to give you a very generic based answer based off of what the World Health Organization is
It's
pushing
fine.
forward.
She don't listen to me anyway.
It's pushing an agenda. That's
You
how they
definitely didn't
work.
listen to
That's
me.
how they work. So go back to the main topic at hand. Do I think that there is good trauma and bad trauma? Nope. I think there are bad trauma, but I think all trauma literally is bad trauma, right? All these things are hurting you. But thing about it is, how resilient are you to overcome those things?